Should Jeffrey Armstrong have been able to make accurate statements 77% of the time, just on generalities, logical guesses, and dumb luck?
I don't think you can explain what I did as luck, because I didn't see the 9 people at all. Obviously, astrology, used properly, has the ability to see certain patterns or core things that I shouldn't have known just from their birth information. But I respect skepticism as the beginning of intelligent thought in any subject, to start out looking for reality rather than belief.
While skeptics will explain the results of our study as due to chance and wishful interpretation, believers will see them as further proof that the stars and planets directly influence our lives.
Hi, and welcome to The Seeker
and The Skeptic.
I'm Kat, and I'm the flaky, unpredictable, irrational seeker.
And I'm Rebecca. I'll be your sarcastic, grumpy, close-minded, skeptical host. Or maybe we should just be ourselves.
Sounds good to me. This podcast is going to dive deep into controversial topics that some may call new age or woo-woo, or just plain foolish.
And look at them with a skeptical but open-minded approach that will hopefully encourage understanding and acceptance from both the skeptics
and the seekers.
This episode, we looked into astrology and conducted a somewhat scientific test that might prove or disprove astrology and will almost certainly embarrass us both. But first, Kat, what is astrology?
Well, what I do know is not to confuse it with astronomy, but it is also based in the sky, the astro realm. So many people know their sun sign or star sign. It's the thing that you find in newspapers with a horoscope attached to it. But that's only a fragment of what the stars, the planets can actually tell you about yourself, about world events, and even about predicting the future.
Or at least what they claim the stars can tell you.
Well, we'll find out.
So it's based on the time you were born, the place you were born, and that gives you, you're calling it a sun sign?
A sun sign, yes. But there is much, much more. So what I originally knew before we started really digging into astrology was that I was an Aries. So
Samesies.
Yeah. So this basically means that apparently, we're quite combative. But I always thought, well, I don't really come across like this. And actually, a little while ago, a friend of mine kind of tried to suggest that it's not all about where your sun is. It's not all about your sun sign. There's much more going on. And so this is partly why I wanted to talk about this topic on The Seeker and Skeptic, because I wanted to investigate what was really, what people who are really into astrology were finding out about.
So they're not, if you're really into astrology, you're not just reading the 4 sentences in a newspaper that describe Aries or Taurus or whatever. You're going to a professional and getting a whole horoscope made.
Yes, what they call a natal chart would be a description of what the planets were doing in different parts of the sky the day you were born and the time you were born. And even that, knowing the time you're born, is one of the biggest things you can do to kind of get an accurate reading, as it were. So the fact that you're not given that when you just read your horoscope in a newspaper, well, that was, that's something that people might look down on, as it were. So yeah, I guess as a seeker, my interest was just learning more about this and seeing what I could learn about myself. I'm really interested in personality types. So something like the Myers-Briggs type indicator or the Big Five model, these are all typologies, ways of kind of categorizing people's personality types and preferences. And I can really geek out on this stuff. But I remember actually when I first met you, Rebecca, saying, do you think this is any different from astrology? And maybe I should get into astrology if I like all of this personality type stuff so much. It's basically the same thing. It's somebody outside of yourself telling you things about yourself.
Yeah.
And there's something I find very kind of addictive and I don't know, I get very curious about that.
It's so weird because for me, astrology, I remember it being very popular in the 90s, or at least among, the kids I was hanging out with, and our mothers and our stepmothers and our aunts, mainly women, strangely. I don't know if that's true. That's just my anecdotal experience, but it does seem to be a female-led thing. And I thought that it was something that people did for a bit of fun. It didn't occur to me that anyone took this seriously. I didn't know anyone who'd paid to have their natal chart done or anything like that. I thought horoscopes were kind of like a joke or a game. And I thought this so much. I was so convinced that this was something that no one took seriously. I actually used astrology as an example of a pseudoscience in a talk I gave quite recently, thinking this is a great thing to debunk and kind of be a bit silly with, because there'll be no one in the audience who takes it seriously, and we'll all be able to have a bit of a laugh about, who really believes this? And it'll be a great example to use to do some critical thinking experiments with the audience. And as soon as I put up astrology on the projector with a little diagram of all the charts of all the what they called houses, all the different signs. I saw people suddenly click their attention, like, oh, this is something I'm into. And I'm standing up there in front of a group of people who, I mean, these people are not silly people, but they're also not skeptics, they're not critical thinkers. And I realized halfway through, or not even halfway through, like 5 minutes into a talk, that I'd misjudged my audience quite massively.
Well, I think it's fair enough. I'd love to have done a poll on that audience and to see how many people know way more than their sun sign. I get a feeling, because this was in Brighton, that people would have been able to tell you their ascendant and all of these other things, which maybe we'll touch on. But what I'm discovering since researching more and more of it is that there are quite a lot of people into this stuff.
Yeah, I really should run these talks by you first before to get the seeker's perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what we did today is a bit of a test. I mean, it's far from scientific, but do you want to run through the parameters?
Yeah. So we basically got the horoscopes, looking at the time of birth, the date of birth, and the place of birth from 10 celebrities and the two of us. So we had 12 horoscopes. We then summarized these.
Sort of edited them down.
Yeah, taking a kind of equal paragraph or so for each horoscope, took away the any identifying features, and presented them to Rebecca's husband.
Who knows both of us. Obviously, he knows me. I hope he knows me. And he knows Kat because they work together. So we thought he'd be a good judge. If these horoscopes are accurate reflections of our personalities, it should be fairly easy for him to flick through the 12 and pick out his wife and his colleague from them.
So expectations. Well, do you think he'll be able to do it?
To be honest, no. This is one of these things where I want to be more open-minded, and I want to give this, the full, proper, neutral observer treatment. Mm-hmm. But I'm so biased. My priors are so against astrology. I just find it so hard to even conceive of how astrology could work. So I'm doing this carefully, and I edited them down in a neutral way. I didn't cherry pick what information. I went through with a neutral sorting mechanism to pick out the sentences that I included in the final paragraph. So I did it as neutrally and sensibly as I could. But the whole time I'm thinking, it doesn't really matter how I do this because this is all bullshit anyway. Just to be completely honest with you.
I think this is fair enough. I kind of am already coming up with excuses as to why he doesn't get it right. So
he doesn't really love me. Is that the first one?
Doesn't know who I am, and I may even get offended by it. But it's the fact that I think this is one of the problems with a lot of tests on astrology, and we'll talk a bit more about the science soon, but it's hard to disprove, right? So we could just say, well, Paul didn't have enough information.
Yeah.
I will say that we got these from Cafe Astrology.
That's right, yeah.
Which is, there are quite a few free places where you can get quite detailed. I mean, these were very lengthy horoscopes. These are natal charts, is what you'll find them called. And, you could even say that even in editing them down, that isn't giving the astrologer a fair, or the picker of...
Yeah, I did think that at the time, but I thought it was kind of unfair to give Paul like 40
Reams.
paragraphs,
Right.
12 different sets of 40 paragraphs of personality descriptions. Maybe if we'd been doing this in an actual scientific setting, we found a better way to do that.
Sure.
But when we talked about doing this, I did say, where do you want me to get the horoscopes from? Your pick was Cafe Astrology.
Yeah.
So whether Cafe Astrology succeeds or fails, it was your choice of horoscopes.
It will be interesting.
What was it like reading your... I assume you've read your horoscope before, but what was it like reading this one from Cafe Astrology, and how does that compare to your general experience?
So it was probably the first one I'd done. And I think because it's so lengthy and it's telling you stuff like, because a real natal chart is telling you everything from where your planets are, like as in what house they are, what sign they're in. And now that I've kind of researched a little more, I can see just how many aspects of yourself and maybe even your future these can call on. So it's like that thing, if you give somebody enough statements, they're probably going to find something in there that they like. And I think especially with these lengthy readings, there is so much that you can agree with. So I did find it very accurate. I think the only thing that I read in the Cafe Astrology one, which was not accurate, was about me being sporty, as if like all Arians are kind of like quite physical. And I'm like, not at all.
We're both Aries, so we both had
are.
that in our natal chart report.
I will say though, now that I know a bit more, and a defense against that would be, well, I've got a Cancer ascendant, and you appear a bit more like your ascendant. And a Cancer is really kind of like soft and, like chilled and emotional. And
but shouldn't the Cafe Astrology take that into account?
They do, but they kind of, clearly, because it's just software, they just bung every piece of information about all the different aspects, bits and bobs. So they don't counterbalance stuff.
Okay.
So that would be a criticism about the setup.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you had to get like 1 to 10, how accurate do you think the reading from Cafe Astrology
8.
was? Wow.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah. What about you?
Well, I was floored by how much information there was. And it probably won't surprise you to hear that I took a bit of a different approach to how I digested that information to how you did. So I looked at it and I was like, this is overwhelming. So I went through and separated out into 395 claims about my personality.
Amazing.
395
That's
claims.
a lot.
That's roughly, because some of them are strange, they're slightly... like they're almost saying two things in one sentence.
Sure.
So I'm not saying this is an exact number. And then I went through and rated them all from strongly agree to strongly disagree, with meh being my middle score.
Yeah.
And I found doing that calculation, it came out as 60% accurate.
Okay.
Which
is
not great.
395.
Yeah. So one of the things that accounts for the fact that it came out as 60% for me was, I think there's lots of things that everyone would rate as strongly agree or agree to.
Yes. Are those Barnum statements?
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. Yeah, these are what people call Barnum statements. They're things that sound really precise, and you're like, wow, that person really knows me when they say it. But on reflection, if you think about it, everyone would probably, like 99% of people would agree to them. Some of the ones from my horoscope were, insecurity is something that you need to deal with at some point in your life.
It's not on mine. No, I think that is fair, and I think many people would say that.
I've got a few great ones here. This one I really like. She likes meeting friends around a good meal and in a cordial atmosphere.
Who wouldn't like that?
Exactly. No, I hate my friends. I like crappy food in a negative, combative atmosphere. That's my favorite meal situation.
One thing that I will say is that, yes, it makes a lot of statements. But there are also so many statements that it could, out of all the things that you could say about humans, I mean, it's like infinite, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of amazing that they can risk being so specific and so accurate, even occasionally. And so that's kind of like the glass half full perspective. Do you know what I mean?
There's some really specific things in your chart.
Yeah.
Like, can you think of any of them?
Well, for me, and this is after kind of researching my chart, not on Cafe Astrology, but looking at individual, like looking at my actual, it's like a map you're given. Have you seen these? So for the Western, the tropical zodiac, you'll be given like a circular diagram.
Oh yeah, I did
see.
I have seen these. Yeah.
And so that is telling you where all the planets are in relation to houses and signs. And it's nuts how much is going on there. Oh, and then there are aspects, like what angles planets are. You could just keep going on. So when I started doing it that way and just Googling what does it mean to have Mars in your third house. And from that, getting very specific things, even just taking that one element. So one of the things was going to die a violent death, probably with a sharp object.
Wow.
Or have a near-death experience involving the similar thing.
That's pretty harsh. And is that something you figured out? That's something you riddled out yourself, or you were told
I riddled it out myself, but like I said, it was actually probably that example. It was taking my placement of Mars, whichever house that is in. I've obviously forgotten it, but it's in a certain house, and that's what that means.
Wow. Yeah, there were some really precise things in mine as well. And I mean, a lot of them are things about the future, which I can't say whether that's right or wrong. But some things, there was one that said, I will live with an older person and it will seem great at the beginning, but we'll grow to hate each other.
Oh.
So I don't know who that could possibly be referring to. My parents, maybe,
kind of
which would be true for everyone.
Right.
I'm trying to think of other specific things it said. It said I'd have an affair.
Okay.
Which is pretty harsh, but very common.
Yeah.
So again, it's like things that seem specific maybe aren't so specific. Stuff about your future and how you'll die is, I mean, I could say anything about how you'll die. You'll die in a vat of peanut butter.
It's true. And yeah, I mean, that is actually quite likely. But it's also very interesting that when you're getting a computer telling you this stuff based on, books and literature based on like years and years of this stuff versus getting an astrologer. So I think it'd be really interesting if we had our charts done by a person, because so many of them are also combining cold reading.
Yeah.
And not in an unethical way. I think they're actually doing it in a particularly ethical way to protect you from some of these things. Like, I'm not sure if it is helpful to tell me if I really, depending on what my beliefs are, about like lawsuits and stuff. Like, it's kind of stressful and I'm not sure.
Yeah. So cold reading is when you look at someone and you make judgments based on how old they are, the sort of clothes they're wearing, maybe how they move, their gestures. It's just reading people. It's that kind of, some people are really good at reading people, often therapists, for example, are really good at reading people. And that's what you mean when you say they're combining those skills of people reading with information from the stars.
Yeah, and also the feedback they're getting verbally. So I think like any good therapist is probably going to be picking stuff up. That's what a good therapist does. They're going to be talking to you, being like, okay, I know where to take this. They're not just spouting out random stuff that might do more harm than good.
Yeah, so obviously the cafe astrology algorithm can't do that.
Can't do that.
Although it does have our age, our gender, and our place of birth, what it could potentially be using as information. But actually, in cafe astrology's defense, I don't think it is, because I put through my own horoscope and then I put through my horoscope but changed the gender to male.
Oh, yeah. Well,
I called him Male Becker.
Yeah.
And I did a differential analysis on the text that came up from those two horoscopes. The only difference is pronouns.
Yeah.
There's an opportunity there for them to do something sneaky, which they didn't take, which is I kind of respect them, but also maybe just laziness.
Yes and yes. Weirdly, I don't hear gender talked about at all with the planets. No one ever says, oh, if you're a girl, it's this. If you're a boy, it's that. Yeah, and that's just something that's just occurred to me.
The other thing I noticed in both mine and Mel Becker's readings is there were a lot of contradictions. So
yes, and this is, again, because it's a machine not taking into account. So an astrologer might say, well, some planets are going to have more, I don't know, like power. They're going to have more of an impact. And I just don't think the software is good enough to do that.
Yeah.
And
but this kind of creates a situation where you can go through and pick out the things that you like. For example, in my chart, it said I had a very focused and intense sexual nature, which also adds to very magnetic quality to my appeal, which I like. But then it said later on, this might be someone without much charm, without sexual magnetism, who holds back their sensuality.
It's true. And I can really understand. I've seen bits like that myself as well. And it's part of the benefit, but also the negative part of there being so many aspects.
Yeah.
Like some things overlap and will contradict. And I think a good astrologer would be like, well, this is clearly more dominant. So you kind of have to read these with, like, it almost bakes in benefit of the doubt.
Yeah. It's also all these qualifying statements, like I might be someone without much charm. I could be this. I
Yeah.
can do that. Everything's very like.
Well, you
it
can
could
go
be
either way. Well,
yeah.
this is it. And that's another thing an astrologer would say. They would be like, well, these planets, they're not like people. And it's not like set in stone. So even though we kind of give them characteristics as if they're people. So, for example, Jupiter is seen as what they call a benefic, which means it's very benevolent on the whole. But that you could start anthropomorphizing that and be like, well, this is like this gentle giant. He's a person. He does nice things for us. But Mars is like...
He's a dick.
Yeah, he's a dick, right? And anyway,
everyone knows that.
but I don't think it is that. I think it's more like the weather, and you're going to maybe feel a bit more down if it's raining or something. I think it's a lot more subtle.
Yeah. So what you're saying is an astrologer might get all the same sort of information that we got from Cafe Astrology, but then they'd use their own discernment in picking out what's relevant.
Yeah.
Whereas here, we're being asked to use our discernment and pick out what's relevant.
Yeah.
And if it would be interesting for you to take apart your horoscope like I did into however many statements you end up with and see if it is an 8 out of 10 or an 80% accuracy, or whether that's just what you felt from reading it. But I think keeping in mind that when we talk about Barnum statements, the scientist, Barnum, I guess his name was, no, Foer, the Foer effect, Forer, if you want to look it up at home. He was the guy who discovered, or not discovered, but properly scientifically investigated Barnum statements. And he got an 85% accuracy rating by just throwing generalized statements at people. So if Cafe Astrology is actually performing worse than this scientist with his Barnum statements, that's not a good look for them.
That's true. That is true.
So we've got the ones that Paul picked out. That's my husband, Paul, for each of us. Do you want to go first and read yours out and see how well it fits you?
She has lots of vitality. She likes public life. She is popular and her company is appreciated. She is balanced, at ease with herself, and usually gets on well with her parents. Good so far. She has a very good memory. Scientific or medical studies preferred above all others. Incorrect. She is humble and moderate, calm and reserved. Not really. Emotional discipline. Not really. She's willing to help, devoted and gentle. So that whole bit, no. Weaknesses. Servile nature, frequent changes of occupation, gets annoyed, upset, worries. She is too shy. Yes and yes to all of those things. So I would say out of that one, it's like a 60 to 70, like 2/3 of this was accurate.
Yeah. So one of the things that you said that's bang on was gets annoyed, upset, worries. Do you know anyone who doesn't get annoyed, upset, or worries?
What I will say is that this isn't my horoscope. I'm willing to put my life on the line. No, I'm not. But I think there is part of it that made me think this is my right one.
Yeah.
But I don't think it is. But anyway, we'll work that out too.
Okay.
So, go ahead.
I think probably the reason Paul chose that one for you could be because you do get on well with your parents.
Yeah, that's actually quite a specific statement.
And the thing about being comfortable with yourself, that's...
Yeah.
Although, again, I don't know.
I'd like to say that, what's my favourite line there? She has lots of vitality. Yeah, let's go for it.
It's got lots of lists as well. That's something I noticed in my horoscope as well. Like one of the lists I read that I particularly like was, she's jovial, expansive, dynamic, kindly, altruistic. She has good judgment, is tolerant, and likes food.
And it's like, right. Oh, God. But also, you're going to read that and check the ones that particularly
Exactly. If you agree with one or two of those, you'll be like, wow, that's amazing. But they've thrown so much stuff at you just in one list that it's... Okay, so let's see what I've got for my reading. She is an opportunist. She can express herself easily and learns quickly. She is welcoming and gentle. She likes travel and intellectual work. Weaknesses. A changeable and diffuse nature. Wastes energy by doing too many things. That's true. She lacks persistence in achieving set goals. She has a very good memory. Oh, this is the same, because we're both Aries, maybe. Scientific or medical studies preferred above all others. She is humble and moderate, calm and reserved, emotional discipline. She is willing to help, devoted and gentle. Weaknesses. Servile nature, frequent changes of occupation, again the same, gets annoyed, upset, worries. She is too shy. And then the last bit says, she has changeable moods, a reserved character, is stubborn and lacks assurance. Her relationship with her mother may have been difficult. She has many considerable family problems. This is the standard aspect for children who are abandoned or lack maternal love. Whoa, harsh.
No, yeah, but it's like it's interesting, and like I've never read anything like that in my own chart, for example. So it's like it is kind of remarkable that you can't deny that certain statements just can't be true for two different
That's true.
people.
And there was lots of stuff in my actual horoscope.
Yeah.
And we're going to reveal in a minute if he got these right. But there was lots of stuff in my actual horoscope that was specific and that didn't fit me.
Yeah.
So I think with so much, it's 40 paragraphs, 395 statements. You put in one or two and they match, and that's what people remember. And that seems very, very impressive.
Yeah, yeah.
So would you like to know?
I would like to know.
Da, 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 da. Your reading is actually the reading of Carol Tavris, a renowned skeptic, psychologist and feminist who wrote the book Mistakes Were Made but Not by Me. It's a brilliant book. It's all about cognitive dissonance.
I think we'd have to read it. Like we're 60% the same person. Yeah. and what about you?
And mine is the horoscope of Ashley Olsen, one of the Olsen twins.
I knew it.
I never knew she had such trouble in her family life. That doesn't come through on TV at all, does it?
Who knew? Well, that's interesting. What I will say is I'm giving myself the test. Maybe we'll do it afterwards, but I'm determined that I'll be able to pick out my own horoscope from the list of the remaining 10.
Oh, how determined?
I would say that I have an 80% chance of getting it right.
Okay, we're going to pause the podcast and Kat's going to have a little look right now. Okay, we're back. So Kat was having a quick look. You probably remember because for you guys, we've only been away for a second. But Kat was convinced that she could pick her horoscope out of the 10 that we have left, which will be us two, me and her, and 8 celebrities. Mm-hmm. And you picked number 7. Why did you pick that one?
I agreed with, I think, all of the statements.
Anything that particularly stood out?
No, adventure. I like to throw myself into adventure. Audacious, bold, and rebellious. I don't even know about that. Unable to stay in one place. Again, liking the public life. Ambitious. That's about it.
So you had a 1 in 10 chance of getting the right one just from random chance. Also, you have read this before.
Yes.
So although I don't suspect you of cheating, but you do know roughly what your horoscope looks like. Yeah. So with that in mind, let me reveal that you picked number 7, and that is the horoscope of Kat from Croydon. Yeah,
really?
That's your horoscope.
Oh, that's dope.
It's pretty impressive.
That's crazy.
Yeah, you had it down to. You had it down to number 3 or number 7. Number 3 was me. It's my horoscope.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh,
wow.
I think we should just stop here and become astrologers. Oh, that's really weird. Okay.
So how does that change the way you think about the this particular cafe astrology reading? Does it at all?
So I think it's limited for the reasons that we spoke about. But because I've also been doing so much reading about what all of these different things mean, the signs, the houses, the planets, the aspects, man, I have this like profound respect for anyone who is like legitimately learning or is an astrologer, right? And maybe we can dive into the history of it.
It's a really complicated topic, and I thought it was just a case of 12 signs equally dividing up the year. You plonk yourself in one, and that's what it is. Yeah. But it's much more than that. And
I said at the start about the personality type stuff. I think this goes way beyond any personality type model that I know of.
Wow, that's a big claim.
Like way beyond. As much respect I have for these and all the science, the actual science that's gone into those, they're so not that different. I mean, even as far as I know, the Big 5 model, which we spoke about on last week's episode.
Last episode, anyway.
The last episode. We basically... somebody created that from looking at a lot of adjectives to describe people, a lot of preferences, and just kind of tries to group them together. And this actually seems to have a lot more going on. It's not just about your personality type. It's kind of potentially telling you a lot more.
So does it make claims about your future?
Yes.
Because this is something that I always think, like, you'll meet a tall, dark stranger. That's something you might read.
And this is why it there's a reason for that. I mean, we know the paths of the planets. So, scientists will say, yeah, we know that. That's fact. And if you can say that from past experience and all these patterns and what we know from our ancestors, is that if Jupiter is here, Mars is doing this, that's going to affect us in a certain way. And it's kind of like, it's pretty straightforward in that sense.
Well, we'll get into a certain way when we talk about the science of it, because I'm not entirely sure how this is actually supposed to work. But how was the whole astrology thing developed in the first place? Do you know the roots of it a bit?
Yeah, well, they're saying that some would trace it back as far as 25,000 years BC.
Wow.
Yeah, in Mesopotamia, which is basically modern day Iraq. And they've spotted, carvings on cave walls. But really, it starts kind of getting interesting in the 17th century BC. You've got these records of Babylonian omens. So this was stuff like, if you dream of eating a wild bull, your days will be long. So all it is pattern spotting.
Oh, so that's not actually astrology. That's just general pattern. Because this is what I always wondered. Why is it focused on the planets? What I was thinking about is bird migration habits. So you could say we were both born in April. You were born on the 7th. I was born on the 8th of April. That's around the time of year that swallows return to the UK.
Yeah.
Swallows are good luck. They signify travel. That's why sailors have swallow tattoos. You have one for every 5,000 miles you travel.
Aww.
So, like, if we're born in the time when the swallows come back, you could say that's a pattern. Yes. I could make a whole book of my bird migration astrology.
Yeah. Oh, but you could, and I'm not denying that. But, like, in the way that I'm seeing it, it's kind of like it's all true. But, okay, we can talk a bit more about this later, but I don't think people are saying planets and whatever's happening in the skies are causing things to happen. It's more like they're creating the setting for things to be likely to happen.
Okay.
So it does feel different to me. I don't know about that. But you're right. I mean, these aren't correct. Like the idea of, you're dreaming to eat a wild bull and having your days numbered. That isn't correct or true. But at the time, like, that was a pretty wise conclusion if it happened a lot and your mate kept dreaming of bulls.
It reminds me a bit of what they call sympathetic magic, which a lot of early societies have. We still have aspects of it in our current. It's a very like classic psychological thing that human brains do. Like you think, I want to make something bad happen, so I'm going to nail a little, like a voodoo doll. I mean, I don't understand that much about voodoo, but from the layman's understanding of voodoo dolls, you get a little person-shaped thing. You put something like blood or hair that relates to the person, then you stab it. And the idea is that you've created like a little metaphorical version of them, and that will somehow affect them in real life, because they're similar. Or the idea that you can take ground up rhino horn if you have erectile dysfunction, because the rhino's horn is kind of like a big, hard, erect thing, right? It's like that connecting things in a metaphorical way, not a literal way.
That's it.
And imagining that you can sort of reverse engineer that, like if they're connected through meaning, because you've attributed meaning to these two things, then they'll also be attracted causally, or that they'll mirror each other. That there'll be some.
That's the theory, the underlying theory of all, I guess. But yeah, it basically spread. It really started to look like astrology as we know it today is maybe 200 to 300 years BC, in the age of Ptolemy in Egypt. But basically, so that's when they started looking at planets, I guess. Then we're getting into about 500 BC when it's all happening in Greece. So that's when you get natal charts, which is what we refer to today as Hellenistic astrology. Anyway, after this, it starts developing really fast. You've also got this on the side is Vedic astrology, which is happening in India, like in the East.
So it's like developing alongside, but they're not interacting with each other, obviously, because they're in different places.
Which is wild. And like, I haven't looked into Vedic astrology much, but even the chart itself looks entirely different. So they've really retained different things.
Yeah.
So then over time, there have been like a lot of different revivals throughout history. For example, Kepler, this scientist in the 1600s, and other astronomers were also astrologers. So anyone who's looking at the stars, it's all kind of the same thing.
Oh, so it's kind of like how chemistry came out of alchemy.
Exactly.
Astronomy came out of astrology. It was 100%. Like a pre-scientific understanding of how things worked.
And there'd be people like doing both.
I don't actually know if chemistry came out.
I think it did. I've heard that. Well, I've heard that comparison. So yeah, and then in the 1900s, there was a revival by the Theosophists, mostly British, some in the UK, the USA.
They're coming up a lot lately, aren't they? Theosophists. We were talking about them just a minute ago.
Talking about them. And it's kind of adapted, and even in the 60s and the 70s, we've got humanist psychologists and even more scientific approaches apparently getting tied in with astrology. And now, I mean, what I'm seeing at the moment from doing more research is that there are tons of great podcasts and YouTube channels dedicated to astrology.
Yeah, I don't know if this is actually a real effect, or it's just because we are we've just spent a couple of weeks looking into this and trying to learn about it so we can talk about it. But it does seem like it's on the rise, doesn't it? It seems like it's back in vogue.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I made my mistake, thinking, oh, no one believes in astrology, because maybe 5 years ago they didn't. But now everyone seems to be really into it, or at least everyone who's kind of roughly our age. We must admit that we're millennials.
It seems like there have been waves of it throughout. I mean, you could pick all different times in the 20th century and now the 21st, that it kind of gets this revival, and it might just be some prominent astrologers coming around, and it changes, right? So how it feels now is different to how it felt in the 90s. Even the websites have a different look and feel.
Well, that's what I was thinking. When you're describing it to me, you're talking about it being like a personality, kind of akin to Myers-Briggs or one of those personality tests, which is very different from what I'm imagining, which is like tall, dark, stranger stuff. This seems to be more about like what you're predisposed to, like what your character will predispose you to, versus actually telling your future, which is, if you'd asked me before I started looking into this, that's what I presumed astrology would be, or at least a lot of it would be.
Oh, that's interesting. Whereas I think a lot of astrologers now, I don't know, but it'd be interesting to see how many clients they have asking about their natal chart, or about their, I think they call it their election. Like, there would be different charts, and I feel like an electional chart is when you're kind of asking somebody, when should I move abroad? And how many people are using that as a means of getting information versus just understanding themselves.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So do you think that's the attraction? That's why it's in vogue, because it's a way to understand yourself?
It's possible. It's definitely why I was drawn to it. I'm definitely less interested in somebody telling me about my fate, because I don't think it's that nice. But
you wouldn't be interested in hearing about your fate? If someone could tell you accurately what's going to happen to you in the future, you'd be like, nah, not interested, mate.
You know what? I'd only be interested in if they were giving me advice of how I can kind of handle it or avoid something.
Yeah.
And actually, even some of the stuff that I've done online have been potentially helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, at the same time, you could say these things to anyone, and obviously it would just be general good advice. It's not like I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to do this now. But it's definitely given me something to reflect on, which I think isn't bad for fortune telling. As opposed to me being like, oh crap, I'm going to die this like violent death. I should look out for sharp objects.
I think it's really interesting that this like obsession, this revival, let's call it a revival of astrology, it coincides with an interest in people around our age, especially women, being into all the personality stuff. And I think it's something to do with the fact that we like stuff that explains ourselves, that like solidifies our identities. And I wonder whether, this is just completely speculative, but hear me out. Could it be something about the fact that our generation have got used to understanding ourselves through keywords? So, for example, I'm like thinking about, my sex life and what I'm attracted to, what I'm not attracted to. It's really convenient for me to be able to type in bisexual into Google and then follow all those little links and be like, that's what I am. Oh, that explains so much. Like, and the funny thing about that is it's nice to see that echoed back and to feel like, oh, good, there's a word for what I am. Mm-hmm. But also, it's sort of, once you've identified what you are, given a label to it, it sort of encourages you to fit into that group and to do the things that all the people on Reddit or, all the other bisexual people online writing, you're like, oh, that's what I am. And I must, suddenly you've got a group to conform to. I wonder whether there's something like that going on with astrology.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think it sounds a lot like how we find comfort in groups, right? And tribes. And that doesn't seem like a modern thing. That seems like we always wanted a tribal identity because it made us feel safe.
Yeah.
So I think it's an extension of that.
It's interesting you say comfort, because that's definitely, I feel like that's part of it, because there's something really nice about, when a friend will like go to a little bit of effort to get you something, or like, oh, I found this poem, I thought you'd really like it. It's just right up your street.
It's tailored to your...
Yeah, it's like saying, I know you. I know stuff about you. I recognize you.
Yeah.
I've spent the time. I'm invested in you. That feels really good. And I think that must be a really basic human urge to be known. And that's basically what these charts are doing, because they're telling you stuff about you.
Yep.
And you don't have the risk of being vulnerable like you would if you were exposing yourself to a real human being.
Yes, especially reading them, and obviously having like a person to do it. Because I was thinking, I'd love to do your chart personally, and I realised, come to see what I have now, how bloody personal it is. Whether or not it's real science, it could potentially be a very personal thing that you're letting somebody in on.
But the weird thing, the other thing, you don't have the risk of like exposing yourself to another person, but you also don't have all the benefits of genuine intimacy. If, as I suspect, as a skeptic, you're just getting Barnum statements and generalized stuff thrown at you with a few specifics based on, your age, your race, whether you're wearing a wedding ring.
Yeah.
What you're actually getting is kind of like a faux intimacy that might sort of satisfy that urge, but actually you're not building a relationship. I certainly wasn't building a relationship with cafeastrology.com. And that's kind of, I don't know, that makes me feel a bit sad. Like if that's something that our generation is drawn to because we're lacking intimacy. I don't know. Again, I'm just throwing stuff out, much like an astrologer.
I think I agree with all of this. I do think that it's more universal and throughout the ages. What you're describing, I think, is true in terms of like what humans want and even need. And it was also a reason why it has been going on for so long. The other thing that I would add is our need for some kind of degree of certainty.
Yeah.
And so particularly when it does come to, what's going to happen next Tuesday, I will point out that what we're going through right now as we're recording this is one of the biggest, big deal to lunar eclipse. It's the longest one of the 21st century.
That was last night, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And these things... If you're in this world of astrology, if you could, like me, have been worrying about it for weeks.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting. And it's like, even though I am technically more interested in the natal chart stuff, I'm still can't help but be interested in what's to come. And that, again, is our need to have some kind of feeling of certainty and control.
Yeah, like a framework, a structure, so that we have a way to interpret the world and maybe some clues as to what's coming up.
And to watch out for. Yeah. So and again, that has been going on since the dawn of astrology.
But it seems like astrology has shifted. And maybe that is to suggest that it's not really a science, because you'd expect a science to just carry on producing the same truths. But if it's shifting to provide for different needs, so back in the day, maybe they wanted advice about their crops. Now we want to know what our personalities are.
Interestingly, I don't see how... Okay, and I don't know for sure, but I think it's shifted surprisingly little, given that the houses still represent, as far as I know, more or less the same parts of people's lives as they used to. So it's really weird for some reason. I think there are some really strange... so each house represents a part of your life. So house 1 would represent the self. So that's like, I am, and some quite basic stuff. And then house 10, oh God, that's probably a bad one. I think it's to do with ambition.
Okay.
And fame maybe. But all of these things, nothing's to do with social media. They're all, and you can adapt social media and be well, that's clearly to do with this house. But I don't see how the actual system has changed, which is, I find alarming. It's just amazing that it hasn't changed as much as it could change. Even, again, going back to the personality type systems, even they seem to change quite a lot in short periods of time. And that's because science pushes things on.
Yeah, that's true.
And,
yeah.
I mean, that's just an idea, but it's interesting that to me that this is something that has been so old.
Yeah, I guess what I was saying in that it's changed is that the sort of pre-agrarian cultures that you were talking about right at the beginning, and they're very early, that seems like a completely different thing to what we're doing now.
Yes.
But you're right, you would expect something to develop, obviously.
Yeah.
It just seems strange. It's almost marketed.
Yeah. Oh, well, without a doubt. And you can you can see how people are really going to town with the marketing of astrology now.
It's a very like 90s retro aesthetic as well, which I guess makes sense because we're just getting to the age where we're being nostalgic for the 90s.
Yes, there's that. It's interesting how many sites that don't look like that at all now. And some seem to be more geared towards a certain type of like, they're going like less traditionally feminine and going down a more like maybe traditionally masculine approach.
It would be fascinating to find out how many men are into astrology.
Yeah, I think maybe not as many as women, but it's on the rise. And I listen to some incredible male astrologers on podcasts, and a lot of them are maybe coming from a kind of like similar to me, like personal growth kind of background.
Yeah. So one of the things that what gave us the idea really to start talking about astrology was this video that you found on YouTube of a show, and this must have been from the 90s, definitely, because the host was Skinner from the X-Files. I don't know.
How did I miss that?
I don't know. Well, he looks younger even than he was in the X-Files, so maybe you didn't recognize him. But also it's a grainy video because it's from like TV in the early 90s, late 80s. But I was hooked from that first second. It's one of those strange or fiction sort of shows where he's like, and now we're going to delve into the weird world. I guess it's kind of like our show. It's the weird world of astrology. And he has a particular Vedic astrologer, actually, Jeffrey Armstrong, on the show. And they watch him doing some readings. And then they conduct a test, which is not the same as our test. But I'll give you a sort of a rundown of what goes on. And I really think anyone who's listening should go and watch this clip because it's very interesting. What he does is he's given the date, time and place of birth and gender of 9 people. And then he puts together a reading, which I think is about 10 statements about them. And then he records himself reading out the reading. And Michael Shermer, the skeptic Michael Shermer, one of my faves, is sitting there and watching the people react and asking them questions about how accurate they find it. So the first woman is shown a reading of this astrologer saying certain things about her, and she's like, oh, that's right. Oh, I'm not sure about that. And then she gives a rating. They do this for 7 of the participants. And they all give them a rating of around 68% average. Like 68% accurate, which is good, not as good as in the Barnum statements experiment. So not great, but not bad. And they're particularly impressed by certain things. For example, the first woman, the astrologer says, you'll either be a martial artist or a dancer. You know, you're a very physical person. She's like, oh, that's right. I took a martial arts class. And, you know, that does seem, I can see why she'd respond that way for several reasons. One, because she's on film and she's been primed to look for similarities. And 2, that is right. I mean, she's into martial arts. That's something she's interested in. She's been to a class. So he's right. But again, it's that thing of like something that seems very specific. Yeah. But if he'd said that to me, I'd be like, yeah, I love to dance.
Yeah.
Would you have said yes to that? Have you ever done any kind of martial arts or enjoyed dancing? You've never enjoyed dancing,
no,
I don't think.
I wouldn't agree with that. So all the physical ones I never agree with. But I have read in my chart something to do with me like being quite physical and athletic. And I'm like, I'm just going to ignore that statement. So, yeah.
So then he goes through the other people, and one of them I think was really amusing to me. There was a guy, I don't want to be rude, but he was not a conventionally attractive man. Well, at least not to me, you know, everyone has their own type, but this is an older gentleman with
butters,
with big bushy eyebrows and grey hair and like a slightly kind of, I don't know whether he was wearing a gold chain, but he looked like the sort of guy he would, Caucasian guy. Actually, maybe he was Greek. He had something of that about him. Not a traditionally attractive man, but the reading that the astrologer, Jeffrey, gave him was something along the lines of, oh, you've been a lot of different places, you've led this really exciting life, you're very wealthy and successful, you're attractive and so charismatic. And this guy was like, oh, that's exactly me. Oh. And it was just sweet. Yeah. But it pointed to another thing that I thought was interesting reading my chart, was so much of the stuff in my chart was complementary.
Yes. And it's interesting because a lot of the ones that, even the ones that I read out in my chart that we talked about earlier, I was like, oh, Rebecca probably doesn't think these things about me. It's how I, on a good day, try to see myself.
Yeah, or how you'd like to see yourself. Yeah.
No, I'm fully aware that's an effect of, even with personality type tests, when you answer these questions, like, you know, I prefer the company of myself, whatever, you aren't actually the best judge of yourself.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? But it's definitely true. So it won't surprise you to learn, I went through my 395 statements that were made on my Cafe Astrology horoscope, and I counted them up. And out of the 395, there was 88 neutral statements that I didn't rate as good or bad in valence, 87 negative, which I was surprised by. I didn't think there'd be that many. But we saw a couple of those when we read out the charts. There's some weaknesses listed on that. 220 positive, just pure flattery, like, you're great. So that works out as 55% positive, which is interesting.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, we can talk about, you know, whether this is all a good thing or a bad thing, but it's kind of nice that that's kind of maybe bolstering to somebody's self-esteem, right?
Well, it's much nicer than being told you're going to be killed by a sharp object, isn't it? Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that it might influence people to be more agreeable and give a higher, a higher rating when someone says, how accurate do you think this is? If it's all nice stuff or predominantly nice stuff. And that's definitely what we saw. And then the second guy who came after the wealthy, attractive gentleman, they said something like he was details oriented and very compassionate, very caring person. He was like, oh yes, that's me as well. So you know, and they're on TV as well. Are you really gonna say, no, I don't give a fuck about people, I'm not compassionate at all on television?
No, I'm a slob.
But the interesting thing about this experiment, and the thing that made it interesting, the reason you sent it to me, the reason you thought it was interesting, I assume, is the last two readings they switched. So there's two women, and the astrologer has provided a reading for both of them. And without telling the women, Michael Shermer switches the readings and plays the first woman, the second woman's reading.
Yes, they're getting the wrong reading.
Exactly, yeah. And obviously, in theory, if he's just going from Barnum statements and stuff, then
this should be equally correct. Yeah,
but they're not. The women rate the wrong reading significantly lower. So for the wrong reading, one woman gave it 38%, which is not bad, and the other woman gave it 21%. Then they revealed what they'd done. The women were shocked. Well, I don't know if they were shocked. They were surprised. And then they played them the correct readings. And after seeing the correct readings, they said, wow, that was like 89%. They were really, or 92, I think one of them was.
It's so funny. Now that you've retold me the experiment, I've just seen the flaw in the experiment.
Go on.
Oh my God, that was so silly that I missed it the first time around. I was like, astrology must be real, Rebecca. Look at this. And Michael Shermer's there too. Now I realise that the women were primed after they were told that it was wrong. When they got the right one, they were obviously going to try to make this one more right in their heads. I
suspect that was going on a little bit. The other thing that's significantly different between these two women is their age.
Okay.
So one of them is about 20 years younger than the other, I'd say, just from looking at them.
And he could have used that.
It's information, right?
Yes,
so one of the readings said you'll be married twice.
Right, and it's so unlikely it's going to be the young one.
Someone who's young is unlikely to be married twice. So, it gave a really, and it was surprising to see in a kind of skeptical show, to see this presented. And I loved the way that Michael Shermer ended the show. He said, while skeptics could explain the results of our study is due to chances and wishful interpretation, believers will see this as further proof that the stars and planets influence our lives. And I was like, that's what happened to us. Because we watched the same YouTube clip, and I was like, well, that looks like chance and wishful interpretation. And you were like, oh, maybe there's something to this. How insightful that he should put that. Again, impressed by Michael Shermer. But
and I totally didn't even hear that. So... do you know what I mean? Like, it really does feel like a different experience.
You're so primed. When you go into watching something, I'm not saying you're so primed. We're both primed in different directions to interpret it in accordance with our biases. So I go in immediately with an eyebrow raised, and I see all this stuff. I think of Barnum statements, and you go in open-minded, like, oh, maybe there's something to this, and that's what you end up taking away.
It's fascinating, and I think that's going to be one of the themes that are going to probably keep coming up with this. You know, there's a reason why I'm the seeker and you're the skeptic, and we're always going to be bringing this to any topic. But
I had to delve deeper, because I was like, this is a really strange show. It's strange that it should be left on this note. I thought the experiment was poor. I really thought it was poor, and I was surprised that Michael Shermer, presented such a flawed experiment. It would be much better to do it the way around we did our experiment. If you did our experiment in a more controlled way, so people were reading on pieces of paper and trying to pick out which ones. instead of just giving their subjective analysis. They've just seen this guy on the screen talking to them.
And they're being told that this is your chart.
Yeah, exactly. It's a flawed experiment for several reasons. So I did a quick Google and see if I could find out anything about the making of the show or why it was presented in this way. And I found in some corner of the internet a statement from Michael Shermer about it. And he said that they'd wanted to do a more controlled experiment. What they were planning on doing is doing that one and then another one, which was more controlled and more along the lines of something I've just suggested, where it would be reading it on paper, trying to pick them out. But they ran out of time for filming.
What a shame.
Yeah, I know.
But I think that's it. I mean, as far as I know, it's just really hard to find any, first of all, good tests that are actually sound fair for both sides of the argument, basically.
Yeah.
And I think, either way, even if you were to disprove the astrologer or just the charts in one experiment, we would, as I have been doing throughout this, as an astrologer, like, people would just keep finding reasons why, oh, that's not the case, and this is why.
Yeah.
So would you say that astrology itself is sounding like something that's unfalsifiable?
Yeah, I'd say that's one of its main characteristics as a pseudoscience.
Yeah.
This is the difference between science and not science. The idea that it's something falsifiable. So there's a way to prove it's not true.
Yeah.
Like most theories have that. The theory of evolution, for example, has that. All you'd have to do is find a fossil in the wrong place, in the wrong time. Right. So if I found a fossil of a dinosaur that was like way out of the evolutionary record for what we'd suspect, that would disprove evolution, if we could prove it was real and so forth. This is exactly what Christian people do in America.
Yeah.
There's kind of fundamentalist people where they're like, oh no, look, dinosaurs didn't exist, or they're at the wrong time. They realize that is the theory of evolution is sensitive to misplaced fossils in the fossil records, and so they try and manufacture them to prove that. But none has actually been found, which is why the theory of evolution is so strong and why we consider it a scientific fact. Astrology is completely unfalsifiable.
It is.
So it can't be considered a science. It might be something else, but it certainly can't be considered a science. The other main thing I think really troubles me about astrology is that we need plausibility, so a mechanism that makes sense for how it could be operating.
Yeah.
And maybe you can explain to me that. And we need it to be demonstrated to be efficient. I don't think we have either. We don't have how it works, and we don't have proof that it works.
And I'm not going to argue with that, I'm afraid. Unfortunately, in terms of the science, even most astrologers that I've heard speak about this, the conclusion is we don't really know how it works. One guy, I think, I want to say about either in the late 90s or 2000s, was talking about some theory to do with I think it's fine. He was basically this guy, Percy Seymour, who's talking about us having biological clocks that are affected by the magnetic field of the Earth. And so if this magnetic field of the Earth is affected by heavenly bodies, the only thing is with Seymour's theory is that you and I will get more electromagnetism from our kitchen appliances than from planets. So, like, there is people making a really honest scientific attempt to explain how it's working. But I think most astrologers are like, I don't care about how it works. I care about the fact that it seems to work. It appears to work. And for all the reasons we've talked about today, it damn right does appear to work.
It does appear to work. That's definitely true. We can agree on that. The other funny thing about how, like, if we're talking about the mechanism, which fair enough, if they don't want to go into it, it just disqualifies them from much serious investigation. But all the alignments of all the planets and stuff have changed dramatically.
Yes.
And yet...
Oh, there are some hilarious little things like this, which disturb me. So stuff like the original... what you would call the Aries sign. I thought, even when I was researching this, I was typing out, yes, and it's based on constellations in the sky. Oh no, those constellations do not exist anymore, So there's that. There's the fact that the house systems, so again, for all sorts of different reasons about just the tilt of the Earth and stuff like that, the houses have changed. We're off by something like 23 degrees. Some people use what's called the whole sign house system, and then there's this Placidus house systems. There are these 2 different house systems. I've done my chart with the 2 different ones. And, you know, in some cases I agree with one, in some cases I agree with the other, in some cases I agree with both. And you can have other astrologers who will say like, oh, of course, because, and they'll say something about cusps of houses. And Jesus, there is like a reason for everything. You know, there is an astrologer who will have an argument for everything. I personally get a bit more distressed by that stuff. Like, it can't be both.
Yeah, I was really curious because a couple of years ago, it was probably about 10 years ago now, they discovered a new star sign. Do you remember this?
Yeah, and then I've read essays about why we can ignore that.
It's called Ophiuchus or something?
Yeah, and there have been others. And, you know, at one point, they didn't know about Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. So, like, what explains the fact that they're now very powerful planets? All of this stuff just doesn't add up.
I was really curious to know what star sign, if my star sign had changed, because when they added this new one and everything shifted around. So I looked it up, and both of us are actually Pisces.
It's just not true.
That's the constellation that was above us when we were born.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of the other things about splitting the wheel neatly into 12 sections is all the constellations are actually different sizes.
Yeah.
So if you wanted to know what was actually in the sky when you were born, it would probably not be what you're given. I think any Libras and Scorpios, you're not a Libra or a Scorpio. I mean, you are. If you self-define as a Libra and Scorpio, go for your life. But those are not what was in the sky when you were born.
No, it's...
So this would kind of match with what you're saying about them not being very clear about the mechanism by which it works.
Yeah, because you can't have both. You can't say this is all a metaphor, because you could just have that. But you can't also say, yeah, but it's actually based on the actual movement. And, you know, people get down to the degree, and we are paying attention to stuff like where the moon is right now. And we can see that, and we can, you know, witness that. You just can't have both.
Yeah, it can't be a metaphor and literally based on the planets.
Yeah.
It has to be one or the other. And like we talked about our little experiment, I hesitate to even call it an experiment. We've talked about Michael Shermer's attempt, but you know, there has been actually quite a lot written in the scientific literature on astrology. There's a great page, it's just a Wikipedia page on astrology and science, which documents all the studies. I had a quick look at some of them. I'm not really scientifically literate, so I couldn't read them well, but I got the gist. A lot of them have been published in really well peer-reviewed journals like Nature, for example. Almost all of them show absolutely nothing better than chance.
Wow.
There's been big meta studies as well. Basically, when you look at the small studies conducted by astrologers, you'll find that they do very well.
Sure.
When they're done by scientists, where they take large numbers of people and they do proper controls, for example, blinding, so you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
And the scientist who's giving you the list of horoscopes doesn't know which is yours.
Yeah.
You'll find all that stuff just disappears and they go down to just chance.
So does this mean I don't have to worry about being killed with a sharp object?
I'd say no, don't worry too much about that. Although, you know, take sensible precautions, as any human would.
Stay away from sharp objects.
Yeah, I think that's a good plan for life.
I'm just wondering if it's worth talking about the kind of the harms and the benefits.
Yeah. So what do you think? Because when I came into this, I was like, this is just harmless fun.
Yeah. So one thing that's happened to me over the past however many weeks we've been talking about, like kind of doing our own little research about it, I've become pretty obsessed with this. I have got multiple apps on my phone, subscribe to many podcasts, I check stuff, watch YouTube videos. This is addictive stuff. And it's partly because the astronomers I'm paying attention to are characters in themselves. I mean, we'll watch anything on YouTube these days. So there's that. But I can see how people, once they're in, it's going to be hard for them to step back out. So for me to be like, Kat, just stop thinking about, you know, what's going to be happening on August 20th. Because also I've recently got like a few different dates, which will be interesting. We might do a follow-up episode because I can tell you, based on my chart, a few things that might happen to me this year. Whether or not that's going to...
You know what would be more interesting and a better test? You do my chart, find out which days are supposed to be significant, but don't tell me.
Because then you won't be primed.
And then you can say, hey, how was the 19th of August?
Yeah. Okay, we might have to do that. So, yeah, I find like it's addictive and it's a slippery slope. Why is that a bad thing? Well, if you're going to stress about it. So if I'm meant to be having my Saturn return this year, that's not a good thing. And for me to be dreading the month of September, well, that's no help.
Yeah.
Whereas other things like, you know, like we were talking about earlier, getting all of these kind of compliments. And this is why I love personality type tests anyway, because the good stuff is quite bolstering. And I've made like an entire business based on my identification as an introvert. And it's been really helpful to have these conversations with people who are like, yeah, me too. I'm also like this. And you can bond with people over even their sun signs.
Yeah,
Like,
but at least the introvert is something that you chose yourself. I mean, you didn't choose your personality type,
no.
but you read the description of introvert and said, yes, that's me. This is a description being handed to you.
It is more so, but it's only slightly different in my opinion.
Really?
Because like we said, we go through it, we read all of this stuff about us, and we are picking out the stuff that we agree with.
Yeah.
I think we are just disregarding the stuff that we don't agree with in the same way that we go through a personality type test.
I wonder whether that's the sort of direction that astrology is taking, where people will read all those different star signs and say, actually, I think I'm a Gemini. I know I was born under a certain star sign, but I feel like a Gemini, and that's what I'm going with.
That's a really good point. I think I don't see astrologers agreeing with it because for many reasons.
But why do they care? Because the star signs are all wrong anyway. Like, why not choose whichever one you like?
Well, you could say that. You could pick your own star sign, but it would still mean that the chart of your life, like the route it takes and how the planets affect your future, I feel like you would still in some way need to take that into account.
But we've already decided that the planets don't actually.
I agree. I mean, the planets do move.
Yeah.
And you could map them.
Oh, I don't think so.
Different
I'll need proof.
I mean, there are ways that it could still work. Anyway, let's not rebuild.
It's an interesting direction that astrology could go into.
I think
it's
a good market.
What you were saying about it kind of being addictive. What worries me about that is not so much you being, because I think you're a fairly sensible person. I don't think you're going to get too in your head about what's going to happen in September. But what I would worry about with people is the way I feel like the whole concept of astrology is kind of inculcating bad thinking habits. Like not looking for evidence, letting your confirmation bias run wild, not thinking critically.
Okay, what if, because I totally see where you're going with that. It's kind of like, in that sense, that's a slippery slope, just the way of
It's
thinking.
like training you to think poorly.
I would say that I think a lot of people who take astrology seriously and study it, I don't think that line of thinking applies to the rest of their lives. It's not like these brilliantly minded astrologers, and I honestly think that many of them are, and very ethical people at that. I don't think that they're also thinking, yeah, I believe in fairies. Some do. And again, there's nothing wrong with believing in fairies, but maybe
it's like compartmentalized, is what you're saying.
I think in many cases it is.
But do you think that's true of the people like you who've got all the apps on your phone, or just the actual, because it's not necessarily the astrologers that I'm worried about.
Yeah, people who are buying into it.
Yeah, it's the people who are buying into it.
Well, the other thing is that would go towards that is if you're into astrology, you're probably also into other forms of divination, like tarot reading and stuff.
Yeah.
You'll probably also have some crystals. I have some crystals. I also have a deck of tarot cards.
Yeah.
But again, I'm still like, again, I'm kind of like playing it. It's like with a lot of things, I think if I found out that it was actually real, it would scare me. And I think what a lot of people do, even with all of those belief systems, they are compartmentalizing.
Yeah.
And I just saw the same with religion growing up at school. We could have our science lesson and our religion lesson in the same day.
Yeah.
And you can, for many people, you can have both.
On the Michael Shermer YouTube thing, there was a really interesting person, Virginia Bowen, I think her name was. She's a former astrologer. Do you remember this part?
No.
So she watches the Jeffrey, whatever his name was, give a reading, and she comments on it. And she basically says that she used to be an astrologer, but she stopped being an astrologer because she realized what she was actually doing was practicing psychology without a license. She was reading people. She was telling, and I don't know, I would love to hear more about her. Maybe I should have Googled her. I didn't get that far in my research. I wonder whether she went on to train as a therapist, because she seemed like a compassionate person who was good at reading people. But one of the things that she said on that thing was people come to astrologers when they want some guidance. They want some help. They don't go to astrologers when everything's going great and they feel confident in their lives. They'll go to an astrologer rather than their counselor.
Yes.
That kind of worries me.
And I wonder if it's to do with, like, can I it's almost like shirking responsibility. I wonder how much of it is that, because with astrology, it's kind of like, well, I mean, a psychologist isn't going to tell you what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So there's that. But I would also say that in terms of coming at astrology from a pretty like well-grounded, happy state, without much wanting to change or worry about, it's much easier to disregard the stuff like, oh fuck, like my Saturn return is coming. So I think astrology is healthy for people who don't need astrology, if you know what I mean.
Unfortunately, it's people who really are vulnerable are the ones who are going to be spending money. Yeah. And like, I'm just thinking about this whole idea of being an unlicensed therapist.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you're going to make a career as an advice giver, there are several different tracks you can go down. Or if you're going to be an advice giver in this world, there are several different tracks you can go down. You can go and get your degree in whatever, therapy, counseling, psychology, and get credentials. And then people trust you because you have the credentials. Or you can just build up a really good track record of giving good advice. Like there's a brilliant advice columnist called Dan Savage. I don't know if you've heard of him. The reason people trust him is because he's had years and years of giving really good advice. And they take it with a grain of salt. They know he's not perfect. Or you have trust because they're your friend and they're someone you know and they care about you. Or you have a gimmick like tarot or astrology or whatever. You might also be really good at giving advice, but the gimmick is what makes people trust you. And that worries me.
I don't know what comes first, honestly. I think a lot of people, especially now, they are able, at least, to fish for astrologers by their personality type. So if I'm following somebody on YouTube, I like the cut of his jib. I'm going to go for him and not somebody I found in the back of the newspaper. So I feel like it's getting more safe for people.
Yeah.
There is so much more information online if people do want to go looking for things. So that they don't get taken advantage of. I think it's much harder to practice unethical astrology now. Also, you can like shop around for different prices and not get totally ripped off.
Yeah, that's true.
Some people will. I've definitely seen a lot of different prices ranging from, 75 quid for a reading to like hundreds, maybe even like 1,000. But like, yeah, it's
what annoys me might be too strong a word, but what troubles me, I'm going to keep coming back to that phrase, what troubles me about this is that there's ways to earn authority and to earn trust from people.
Yes.
And they are generally getting an education, proving yourself in the marketplace by providing good service, or being someone in that person's life.
Yeah.
When you're saying, trust me, I'm consulting the stars, or trust me, I'm looking in my crystal ball, I don't know, that worries me. And I think that a lot of these people, and you're right, of course, a lot of astrologers are very intelligent, thoughtful, compassionate people. I don't disagree. And I think probably a lot of them believe that what they're doing is reading messages from the stars and telling them people to help their lives. But what I actually think is happening is that these people are just good at reading people and they're good at giving people comfort. And if that's the case, then why not just do that without the gimmick? Because
I don't think it's all that, only because of how complex the charts are. I think it's possible that a lot of astrologers could just take that chart. And because this is what they do, this is how reading is usually done, at least online. They get the person's details, they do the chart, and then they have a conversation. And yes, maybe they're omitting some stuff that is irrelevant from the chart, which is fair because you're going to get a lot of stuff from the planets. But I don't think it's as much of a kind of classic cold reading thing.
Yeah.
But even then, I'm thinking, in all healing professions, there is a way to do things badly. And there's a way to do things well. So I don't think it means that it can all be thrown out. I think it can help people.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure there are some people.
But of course, there's a danger. But then there's a danger in, like people getting a degree as a clinical psychologist
and then being horrible to people, or just behaving unethically. Yeah, of course, that's definitely true. The other kind of thing that worries me about this, and it's something we haven't really talked about at all, but the idea that the planets or whatever can affect your life is often being used not just about your personality and about potential events, but also about your health. There's this whole field of medical astrology where people are giving medical advice based on stuff they read from the planets. I think that is a really bad idea to make healthcare decisions based on where the planets are.
Yes, and I don't know what that looks like other than in my chart. So our 6th house determines our health a little bit.
Okay.
And so I've got my moon in the 6th house. One thing that I read was, I'll get like, it was more like advice, like just don't let yourself get stressed by other people. And
which is good general
also
advice.
like to do with like kind of, I think it was to do with like holding stress in your gut. And I'm like, oh, these are the things that I'm already aware of. It didn't tell me that, I might get rosacea and I've like, I get sunburn.
Yeah.
Like, so they can't really say very much from this field, like a standard chart as far as I know. And the advice I got was like, well, that's solid advice. But I mean, I can see how bloody dangerous it could be if you're actually giving somebody, first of all, giving them the kind of like fear that they might get something.
Yeah.
It sounds horrible. And also then the advice to either ignore Western medicine or something like that sounds.
Well, anything,
I don't know
just
if it's
like,
even saying
you have a very strong immune system, don't worry too much about this.
Right,
or
obviously.
anything like it could affect the way you think
That's
about your
true.
health and the choices you make in a really negative way. And this is not just like some fringe thing. There's a woman called Rebecca Gordon. She's been on Dr. Oz like 3 times talking about this. She has a book called Your Body and the Stars. I haven't read that book.
Yeah.
But the point is, it's reasonable to say, if this works to tell us stuff about our personality and stuff about our futures, why wouldn't it work for our health?
Yeah.
Like, you can't say it only works for personalities and future.
Oh yeah, and the houses would say it does tell you about all aspects of life.
So if you set the stage by believing in it for these seemingly innocuous fun things, and then you're at a situation in your life where you need some healthcare advice and you turn to a medical astrologer and not a doctor, yeah, that's worrying.
So and like with relationships, it's like, oh, you're going to do this, or this won't happen until like. What if people were to like delay or not do things based on their chart, and you think, well, what else are we making decisions on, right? And I think we make a lot of thoughtless decisions.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And it's kind of like, well, is this at least giving people something to go on? Because what else do we have to go on?
Yeah.
We're only going to make a decision at the end of the day, for better or for worse.
I think the other thing that, the reason why I just thought that when I first came across it, it was like medical astrology, something they did in the Middle Ages when they didn't have medicine, nothing really to worry about. But the fact that it's been on the Dr. Oz show, which I know I don't think we get it here. I've never seen it, but it is taken very seriously by a lot of people because he is a doctor.
Yeah,
he's an actual medical doctor.
Massive
and
audience.
he's having this woman on saying, and her book is probably full of completely harmless advice, like you're saying, like don't get too stressed, blah, blah, blah. But the very concept that you can get healthcare advice from astrologers, I just think that's a really bad road to go down.
It's risky, for sure. So definitely I think we can conclude with like astrology risks.
Well, that's...
And potential rewards.
The other thing, and this is not really relevant to us, but I travelled in India a little while ago, and I came across, we were obsessed with reading the local newspapers. When we travelled, especially back in the day before we had the internet, we'd read all the local newspapers whenever we arrived somewhere to get an idea of what the people were thinking and feeling. And Indian newspapers are full of Lonely Hearts adverts because everyone's trying to get married. And often these are put by parents and responded to by parents. So it's not like the person representing themselves. It's saying, my daughter needs a husband and this is what he should be like, because there's a lot of arranged marriage in India. And this weird word kept coming up, Manglic or non-Manglic. Okay. Sometimes it would say, these are English language papers, but this word is completely foreign to me. So we asked this guy who worked at a cafe where we were reading the newspaper. He didn't know either. He was Tibetan. He was like, I don't know what these guys are on about. Go to ask someone else. We asked someone else. And they explained to us, Manglic is a certain aspect, is a certain horoscope aspect, which is really bad news.
Oh.
No one wants to marry someone who's Manglic.
Oh, no.
Yeah, there's so many bad associations with it. So
it's like no one wants a Scorpio.
Yeah, exactly. They're angry, they're dangerous, they'll destroy your family, they'll never give birth to a boy. This is all about women, particularly Manglic women. And she'll be responsible for the death of her husband. This is things that people believe about.
I mean, I don't know a lot about Vedic, but like that is fascinating.
So this worries me, right? Because the idea that you can tell something, and this is not unique to India. Apparently in China, it's really hard to get a job if you're a Scorpio, because people think that Scorpios are just unreliable, bad news in the workplace. So this idea that you can know stuff about someone by knowing when and where they were born, I just think is dehumanizing. Like, why not choose race then? So I know so much about you because you have this color skin. We recognize that that's wrong.
Yeah.
But doing it on star sign, that's fine.
Yeah.
We think it's fine, maybe, because the star signs all say nice, positive things in our country.
Yeah.
But in other countries, that's not true. And if someone was to say, I'm having a really hard time because I'm this unlucky star sign, and no one will employ me, or I just can't get married, it's rough out there, and they would like to search online, is this astrology thing real? They'd find lots of Western websites saying, yeah, it's real. And
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So all of those things are probably not going to make life easy for them either. Yeah,
I'll include a couple of notes in the show notes on the discrimination in China against Scorpios and Virgos. And
they have the thing where they really love people born in the year of the dragon. I'm born in the year of the dragon. So like, they have these ludicrous, sorry, I mean, not to disregard it, but it's taking it very seriously. And I think that is a problem.
So to sum up, like from where we were at the beginning before we started even thinking about this to where we are now, what's your thoughts? Do you think it's something you'd recommend to people?
I would recommend with caution. I would say if somebody was wanting to get into it, be prepared for a very vast, in-depth line of study. I personally feel like I should probably take a step back from it, like literally, like genuinely, because of how I'm sort of like, looking ahead and kind of thinking, well, this is happening then. I mean, one good thing that's come out of it is I've actually been more compassionate to myself and to other people recently, because there's been a lot of like, if you were to look at horoscopes and stuff, what's going on in the skies, this is a kind of rough time we're going through. It's been going on for a couple of months and to do with Mars retrograde. And I'm like, okay, if I'm having a difficult time and everyone else is, I'll be a little bit more careful in my kind of like temper and all of this stuff. So it's like, okay, that's not bad. Can I do that anyway?
It would be nice if we could do that all the time.
Sure. Like, do I need astrology for it? But yeah, it's a bit of fun, and I've really enjoyed digging into it. I could just geek out on it forever. What about you?
Well, as I said at the beginning, I thought this was harmless fun, but the more I looked into it, the more worried I got. So now I feel like I've gone on the opposite journey. Like, you went in and got really interested, and I went in and got kind of like a bit irate about it. Like, I would usually let it pass when someone makes a comment about astrology, but now I feel like it's kind of my duty to point out, hey, there's no backing for this. Don't take it too seriously, because societies that take it too seriously get into real trouble, and individuals who take it seriously when they're in a desperate situation get ripped off by con men. I'm not saying that all astrologers are con men, but there are some out there who charge a lot of money for Barnum statements. So like at the beginning I was like, this seems like harmless fun, I don't care if Kat's into it. And now I'm like, I'm pleased to hear that you're stepping back from it. I really hope she does, because it just seems like bad news.
Yeah, I think so you've become more skeptic and I've become more seeker. So
surprise. No, but what you've said about what it gives you and the insight into yourself and all that stuff, I see why that is valuable, and I see why it's fun. And I agree. And I had fun reading my horoscopes, and I'd be open to the idea of getting a proper reading done so we could test to see.
All right. Well, if you give me your birth time,
so I'm not. Maybe a better way to describe the way my views have changed is I thought it was harmless fun. Now I realize that it's actually really quite interesting, and the people who are into it aren't just silly. That they're people who are getting meaning from this. But also, like all these things, great power comes with great responsibility, and the bad consequences of believing something that's not true about the world seem really obvious in this case to me when you look at stuff like medical astrology, the situation in other countries with astrology, and people getting ripped off. So that's it.
Let's hope this recorded. It is Mercury retrograde. All right. Thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Let us know with a tweet or an email. We'd love to hear about your experiences.
Yes, please tell us what we got wrong. You can email us at hello@seekerandskeptic.com and follow us on Twitter @seekerskeptic.
You'll find the show notes for this and every episode at seekerandskeptic.com.
And you can find my skeptically themed comics at rebeccaonpaper.com, or follow me on Twitter @RebeccaOnPaper.
And I'm at Yogis Who Shave on Twitter, and you can find me bringing secular yoga to the masses at yogiswhoshave.com.
If you like what you heard and fancy supporting the show and spreading the word, we'd really appreciate a rating and review in the Apple Podcast Store.
Or tell somebody you know about the show.
Thanks for listening.
Bye.